We're here this evening to talk about dementia in people with learning disabilities. So really excited that you're here and that you've joined. And just going to give you a quick talk through of how to use Twitter Spaces. I don't know who's in the room who's done this before or who's says. So I'm going to just talk you through a few things. At the bottom of the corner, there's a button that you can press which will request the mic for you. If you want to join us, come and join us. If you have got any questions you want to ask, click that as well, and you can pop on, ask us a question, engage with us that way. I'm joined by Jane, who's going to come up soon and introduce herself, and also Nikki and Rosie, who are on the Meet MacIntyre link. So they're both going to come and join me very soon and have some conversation with us. The other thing, just to let you know, if you want to listen to read captions from this space, because if that's easier for you, you've got the option to do that. And the three little buttons at the top will allow you to click that, and it will bring up options so you can read those there, and if that's helpful for you this evening. So I'm going to ask Jane to just quickly introduce yourself, who you are, where you work. I'm Vic Lyons. I'm from Dementia UK, so I'm really glad to be here this evening doing this space with you. Jane, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Vic, thanks for that. So I'm Jane Nichols. I'm a learning disabilities Admiral nurse, and I work for an organisation called MacIntyre. We support around 1,200 adults and children with learning disabilities and autistic adults and children as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jane. And Nikki and Rosie, would you like to say hi? I know but you're both there because Nikki's supporting Rosie this evening, but would you like to just say hi that way as well?
Yeah. Hi Vic, hi everyone. My name's Nicola Payne. I work alongside Jane at MacIntyre, and I sit within the best practice team, and I lead on health and families. And I'm going to hand over to Rosie. Just who you are.
Good evening. My name is Rosie, and I'm proud to be a part of this Zoom that we are doing. And I hope that with the questions I'll be answering will be the best of my knowledge.
That's all any of us can do, Rosie. That's all any of us can do. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we're really glad that you're here this evening with us, because it's such an important topic to discuss, and I know that the insights that you're going to share are going to be fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about why we're talking about this. So I'm probably going to start off by asking a couple of questions to you, Jane, and then I'll ask a couple of questions to you, Rosie, and then some questions to both of you, really. So that means, Rosie, you can listen to Jane and get yourself prepared and ready for me to come and ask you some questions. So, Jane, I'm going to start off with you then. Can you start off just by telling us what is a learning disability, please?
Okay, so I mean there are loads of different definitions that you can find all over the place. So just to give people a really kind of rough idea. So a learning disability affects the way that a person may learn new things throughout their life, but it's important to remember it's different for everybody, and no two people are the same. So a person with a learning disability might have some difficulty understanding certain information, depending on how it's actually shared with them. They may struggle a bit with learning some new skills. Some people might struggle looking after themselves, but others may live completely independently at home on their own. And it's different for lots of different people, really. Some people have relationships, they live, like I said, they live alone. They might have qualifications, hold down a job, whereas other people might need sort of support over a 24-hour period, 7 days a week. And some people with a learning disability may also be autistic. So that gives you a rough idea.
Thank you, Jane. So when you mention autism, is there other conditions and things that are more associated with a learning disability, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, obviously, we know that certain conditions, so say with women, for instance, may have something called Rett syndrome, or I think the most common is people with Down syndrome. There are lots of different syndromes that can actually cause the learning disability, and some that might be whilst they're developing in the womb, some might be caused through trauma during birth, and others it can be post-birth, so it might be something like meningitis that people might get when they're much younger, and that can cause damage to the brain, which would then cause the learning disability. So yeah, it's a real kind of varied mixture, if you like.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Jane. That's really helpful. Just understanding of what learning disability is and what we mean when we say that. So in the UK, and we're just going to focus on the UK, if that's okay, rather than globally. But how many people live in the UK with a learning disability?
So, I mean, recent figures indicate about 1.5 million people live with a learning disability, and about 900,000 of those will be over the age of 18. But of course, all the figures we talk about are approximate, because some people may live independently all their lives and never be registered with a service or need services. So therefore, we might not be aware that they have a learning disability. So yeah, they are approximate figures.
Fantastic, thank you. And if you do you have the figure to say how many people might live with dementia then around that number as well?
Again, I mean, there are estimates, and I think that sometimes, because there's not always good recognition of how dementia may be with somebody with a learning disability, and also the variation of assessment and diagnostic processes across the UK. So I guess if you were comparing sort of age-related dementias compared to the general population, we'd expect about 13% of adults with learning disabilities between the age of 60 and 65 would have dementia. And when you compare that to the general population, you'd be looking at about 1%. So it's significantly higher, and also younger age groups as well. You'll also see a much higher prevalence of people with learning disabilities and Down syndrome who have dementia in comparison to the general population. So there is no hard and fast figure, if you like. And again, we look at data that's collected from GPs, for instance, who may carry out annual health checks for people with learning disabilities. And as we mentioned before, they're not all registered as having a learning disability. So it's quite sketchy in terms of the prevalence, the exact prevalence.
And I suspect, obviously, COVID and where we're at in terms of diagnosis has had an impact on people getting their diagnosis, as it has for everybody else as well, won't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I guess it's fair to say as well that the number of people, there's been some great advances in science and research, and people are living longer with learning disabilities, and that has seen, fantastic in that people are living longer, but of course then sort of conditions such as dementia, things that are more associated with getting older, are on the increase as a result of that life expectancy increase as well. Is that correct? Is that number just going up?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as you say, it's definitely to do with healthcare better in general for everybody, not just people with learning disabilities. So we are living longer. So yeah, and because of the higher risk factors for some groups of people with learning disabilities, that that risk increases. So, and there is, I like to think, a better understanding of dementia in people with learning disabilities, although we have an awful long way to go, but there is a better understanding, and that could also be why we're seeing some of those numbers increase. So
Perfect. Thank you. Can I ask you then about how dementia might present in somebody with a learning disability? And I guess the question really is, does it present in the same way as it would in somebody without a learning disability? Are there any differences? What's the sort of similarities that you might see?
Okay, I mean, obviously, I can only speak from my own practice and what I've experienced. So, I mean, I often think that it doesn't kind of manifest itself that differently to the general population. It's more about the signs might be slightly more difficult to pick up on for people. So we often talk about diagnostic overshadowing in terms of people seeing the disability before the actual, a diagnosis of, say, potentially dementia. So if somebody isn't used to necessarily supporting somebody with a learning disability, they might think that some of the things they're seeing is because of the disability rather than possible dementia, which we know that obviously that isn't the case. But things that I tend to have people come to me about is changes in the person's mood, or also changes in their behaviour. So all the things that they would normally do day to day, and how those things may change. And again, that tends to be something that we see in the general population. So, and it's often, if they have staff that support them, they tend to notice the signs. We know sometimes the people they live with, if they do share their home with somebody, they may also notice changes in that person's personality, or the way they function day to day, and also family as well, family members noticing changes. So I've gone all around the houses to the answers to that question, but actually, I don't think there is an awful lot of difference. I just think it's more likely to be missed, because people might not be able to pick it up so much themselves.
I think that's a really key point, isn't it? Because if somebody, perhaps maybe their communication has always been a bit difficult, they've always maybe struggled to express how they're feeling, or maybe they've always had some, that's been a challenge to express their needs and their wants and their likes and dislikes potentially. That is, if you start developing dementia, you're not going to suddenly learn how to do that. So you can see how that is going to be potentially quite hard for people. So one of the things you said was about how the person who's living with the person, so that person might actually have a learning disability themselves, and they might be aware of a change in a friend, and and that's something that's quite common, isn't it? I suppose for people to spot that. And have you got any examples of that you could share or talk about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I'm sure Rosie might be able to come in at some point with this, but we've got on the MacIntyre website, we have stories that we've shared where actually another colleague of mine who's an expert by experience noticed changes with a lady that she shared a home with, and she was the one that actually alerted staff to noticing that there were changes with this person who went to get up to go to work on a day that normally she'd never worked. And they had quite minimal support between them, so it was really that person that flagged up those concerns. I think it's important as well to kind of talk about how some of the people that have come in contact with it's been where they've had a learning disability, and their parents are, in their latter years, and they've actually had a diagnosis of dementia, and the impact that has on that person with a learning disability, not understanding why mum's sort of phoning them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is something, that I've come across that never would have happened, or, they've never experienced before.
I think that's so important. I'm going to come to you, Rosie, in a minute to ask you if you remember that story that Jane was just sharing about that lady. And I think that is just so important, isn't it? Because actually people with a learning disability might be the ones who are alerting somebody, who are spotting those changes, who are concerned about their friends or a family member. Do you remember that story, Rosie, that lady?
Do you know which lady it was?
I think, if I'm right, was it a lady who was called, was it Rachel and Alison? Was
That's
it
it.
that the one?
Yes,
Do you remember Rachel and Alison?
I do. I know both of them.
Yeah. And do you remember when dementia, when Alison first got dementia?
I didn't. How can I put it? I didn't know at the time. It would have been if Rachel had told me.
Right. Okay. And they were really good friends, weren't they? They were
They were,
really,
yes,
really close friends, and I think they.
definitely.
How long had they been friends for?
Over 20 years.
20 years.
Over 20.
Was it
Over
really
20 years.
So a super long time they were friends
It
for.
was.
And then when dementia arrived, and how do you know much at all about how they were able to support each other?
You want me to?
Got
Yeah. So Rosie, we're looking at each other here because we're here together. So yeah. So I mean, Rachel was always by Alison's side, advocating on behalf of her, saying what she could still do if that became a little bit more impossible to see. They'd still be doing things together, just in more creative ways. I saw Rosie. And yeah, I mean, you work closely with them, didn't you? Or we're talking like Rachel's still with us, isn't she?
Yes.
So it's Alison that had dementia.
She did.
So, but it's a supportive friendship, and our staff team seeing that and supporting that too is hugely important.
Thank you. And Rosie, can I ask you to maybe it'd be a good opportunity now for you to tell us a little bit about what you do at MacIntyre, because you've been involved in working with people with dementia for quite a long time, haven't you? Or thinking about dementia at MacIntyre.
We've been doing it for at least 6 years.
Gosh, a very long time. So tell us a little bit all about what you do. What's your role at MacIntyre? What do you do?
Okay. Right, okay. So basically, I work for MacIntyre, obviously, with the health team. Spending lots of time thinking and working on dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the dementia project itself, I've worked on a project. It was a 3-year funded project. It ended in 2018, and we've continued to work on the health team with a focus on dementia.
So what do you do? What does that mean? What sort of things are you?
So basically, we've been creating a Wellbeing for Life toolkit, which has a pathway of dementia support.
We've been, before the pandemic, Rosie and I would go and present externally and share the work that we did or we still do at MacIntyre, and we'd raise awareness, wouldn't we, Rosie, of dementia and learning disability.
So you've been to quite a few different conferences, is that right,
Oh,
Rosie?
yes.
And taught,
Not so many.
Yeah, and you do presentations on dementia,
yes.
don't you? And you've done ones actually sort of helping people think through what is it like to have dementia, and kind of how to get a diagnosis, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, we have, yes.
So did you? I think I remember, Rosie, you and I presenting at a conference together where we were talking about the GP and going to the doctor, and actually what going to the doctor's like when you've got a learning disability, and potentially with dementia as well. Do you remember talking about that and going to the doctor?
I do remember going to the GP at Hilltops, because it's not that far from where I am. And as it happens, it might be worth me mentioning, and I don't mind saying it.
Take your time.
When I first went to see the GP, I'm always one for making notes, so that when I get there, I've got something that I could use as a background, so that he would be able to take that on board. But as well as that, the last thing he did was he looked at his computer, and therefore, when he turned round, he definitely said it. It was a case of it's the early stages at the moment. It hasn't got beyond that. So at the moment, everything's done at the moment. I'm still pretty much. I can do everything I can still do everything I can do. So that's not going to change.
Yeah. And that's it. It's about, and actually that's the most important thing. All of us can only live our lives to our best of our abilities, can't we? And do what we can do. And one of the things you said there, Rosie, that I thought was really important is about writing a list. So when you went to speak to the GP, you'd got a list, so you were well prepared, to go to the GP. Did anybody go with you?
And it happens. They've got it in front of me. My key worker.
Ah, right. So they came with you to help you at the GP, and the GP it was a good appointment. They were open. They were honest. You'd got time. How did that all go? Do you mind me asking?
Definitely.
It went well.
It definitely went well.
That's so important, isn't it? Because I think one of the things that I often talk about is I'll say to somebody, ask for a double appointment if you need to. Don't ever feel rushed in the GP, because you need time to ask your questions, to understand what they're saying, to go through your list, and and to get that reassurance if you need it, actually, after you've spoken to the GP as well, so that
it wasn't until after I'd from the notes that I had to when the GP turned around, it was a case of me saying, "Why now? Why have I got it now?"
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel like that, when they sort of hear those words from a doctor, because nobody really ever wants any kind of diagnosis, do they? It's not, we never do, generally speaking. So I think it can be quite why now? Why me? Why has this happened? Can't it? I think that's
one thing, Vic, that we use heavily at MacIntyre is health recording and recording those changes. So people like Rosie and other people that we support can go with confidence, with real detailed, this isn't right, this is, Jay mentioned diagnostic overshadowing, but this isn't me, listen to me. And we do use something called the anticipatory health calendar, which really supports changes that we see within a person, changes that Rosie sees within herself, and it's that evidence base that sometimes a health professional will ask to see, or for us to go back and gather, but we do that daily. So yeah.
And I think that's so important, isn't it? And that's one of the things that I'm glad you mentioned that, Nikki, because we know, don't we, that if you keep an eye on things, you do whether it's an annual check, whether it's a daily check, whether it's whatever it is, constantly checking in and looking and actually being really vigilant for any signs of change, because changes can be for all sorts of things. You might see a change because you've got a B12 deficiency, a hearing problem, a sight problem, constipation, menopause. There's so many things that could cause a change in somebody that you've kind of got to go through that checklist and work out actually what's causing this change, what's making that. And it's only by having those notes that you can then go to the doctor and be really clear, this is the change, it was this time, I noticed it, this is what we've tried, this is what we've done, and feed that back. So Jane, I'm really mindful you might want to come in as well.
No, I was just thinking in terms of COVID and actually, what we've all experienced over the last sort of 2+ years, in terms of the effects of that on everybody. And if we go right back to the beginning of when it first happened, everyone's lives were kind of thrown up in the air. All the routines went out the window. So, of course, when we were looking at the diagnostic process for some people, there were so many things that had changed in their lives, and that of course affects how you live day to day. So it really, we had to take that into consideration when we were sort of looking at potentially if somebody had dementia. And we often found that some of the questions that people were being asked over the phone as part of a dementia sort of screening assessment, if you like, were kind of inappropriate. One, because of the actual timing of it. So being asked, or could you tell me something that you've done in the last 2 weeks, when we'd all just been put into lockdown across the country. So it was kind of like, well, actually nothing's really happened in the last 2 weeks because nobody's done anything. And that had a huge impact, but also some of the language that's used. We found, asking who the latest monarch is, and using terminology that not everybody would understand necessarily. So actually changing some of the terminology that's used can make a huge difference for some people.
Can I ask you a little bit more about that and about that diagnostic process, Jane? Because it's something that Jane and I know each other quite well, and it's something I'm quite passionate about. But is around that diagnostic pathway for people and that process. And one of the things that we know is that across the UK, that whole process can be very, very different from area to area, and some people people will notice a change in somebody. They will go to the GP, they'll get a diagnosis from the GP. Others might not, they might be diagnosed elsewhere, different tools get used. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of how you see that? What would a good diagnostic process look like, I guess, would be the question.
Yeah. Oh, crikey, there's a question. I guess, if we're looking specifically at people with learning disabilities, then, and I know that Rosie and I had this conversation just as part of the dementia work that we both do, and that was one thing. And Rosie, feel free to chip in if you want to, but she spoke about was actually it would have been really good to have a letter that actually explained fully what was going to happen before the appointment took place. And for that to be in a format that the person understood. So I mean, we're going to very much to a digital world now, and so a lot of people learn not all, of course, might not have access to mobile phones, iPads, etc. But just having a letter that might be an easy read, and be able to have some kind of pictures on there to explain the process before it happens would be really useful, I think. Also, maybe allowing the person to actually go and visit the GP surgery. It's an unfamiliar environment that they've not been to before. That can really help alleviate some anxieties for people, just going and have that kind of pre-visit almost. I mean, this isn't an ideal world, and I know things are very different at the moment. And I think really, I mean, normally we would be looking at ruling out any other health concerns that could be causing problems, which you've already mentioned, Vic, in terms of, or it could be anything. Hearing's quite a biggie, isn't it? Which often doesn't get checked, maybe so much for people with learning disabilities. Looking at whether the person has things like a urine infection or anything really that could be causing those changes that we might be seeing. So for those to be ruled out, and also looking at the possibility of having CT scans to see if there are any changes going on in the brain. And again, that's something, I could probably count on one hand that's being offered to people, which, yeah. So, Rosie, I don't know did you want to say anything about...
Yeah, can Rosie, we're going to just I'm just going to ask Rosie the question that she's got, and then Rosie will give her answer. So Rosie, how do you think a GP can help someone with a learning disability and dementia?
Okay, the GP should be honest and open. They should send out a letter before the appointment, explain what the appointment is for and what will happen at it. some people might need pictures to help them understand. I always write a list of questions to help me at the appointment. This helps me to be prepared. Having someone to support you at a GP helps too.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie. I think you've given that such a great answer, because that essentially is what makes a good diagnosis, doesn't it? If you're prepared, if the GP sent a letter. I liked what you talked about, the pictures as well, to help people understand. And I know at MacIntyre, I think you've got some fantastic resources, haven't you, to help people and explain dementia to people, which have got lots of pictures involved in them, haven't they? Do you know the ones I'm talking about, Rosie?
I probably do, because I've got one.
Yeah, we created the series, didn't we? Where Vince has dementia and how to support me if I've got dementia.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, they're all freely available. Yeah, Rosie was involved.
I know, Rosie, you worked really hard on those, because I remember you telling me about them, and they're fantastic resources that are there.
Well, I know pretty much. I know this comes down to Jane. It goes out saying it was actually Jane who introduced me to Alexa. It's been fabulous. Believe me.
How have you used Alexa then?
I'm not joking.
I believe you.
It's brilliant.
Tell us about Alexa.
It helps me to remind me to take my meds, amongst other things. So it's a really a good thing to have.
So Alexa's able to help you to take your medications.
It does, yes.
That's fantastic. What else does she do? What else do you get? I always think of Alexa, it is a she because it's a female voice, isn't it? I guess. So it's what else does Alexa help you do?
Having more support at home. It's good.
Yeah.
And you've got your clock, haven't you? I'm sitting in Rosie's lovely living room at the moment, and you've got a clock with the day of the week and what if it's evening or if it's morning. So at the moment it's Wednesday, it's the evening, and it's 4 minutes past 6, and it's really clear, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a nice big clock, and I guess there's all sorts of things that you can help with your house and make it, easier to navigate your way around.
Definitely.
So the clock, the Alexa. Anything else?
Your diary.
I do have a diary, because if say I've got someone coming round, which I did have today.
Sorry.
The dog.
You were saying you've got a diary, and if you've got someone coming round.
I did have, I had about 3 of them.
Your diary
came one after the other, after the other, after the other. It's never ending. So I'm always the great thing I love about this is not only having support, but also if there's anything that comes up, it might be a music lesson, it might be something from pest control, that type of thing.
You know who to expect.
I know who to expect.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. And you mentioned there about having support. Can I ask you about what support? I know you mentioned your key worker earlier. What sort of supports really helped you, Rosie?
When it comes to bath nights. Talk about the shower head. Other than that, we always have a great fun time.
Yeah,
and when I say fun time, I'm looking at it right now because there's someone across from me. So she'll only tell you herself. She's been a brilliant key worker. That goes out saying because it's been fantastic.
But do you know I know you too well enough to know that I can feel the love coming.
Oh yeah. We always have a fun time.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's actually really important that you're surrounded by people who know you, who understand you, who ideally you like, and better still you love. You know, having these people who provide us our support networks, isn't it? And you know, and yes, we can use things like Alexa and clocks and diaries, but actually, it's having people around who know what you're going through, who get you, and who you can have some fun with. And that's something that is the same for everybody, isn't it? We all thrive in those conditions. So,
as it so happens, in that worth mentioning, I'm going to be going on a cruise with my key worker.
No, you're not.
Wow.
Really?
I am. Oh, yes,
Where
I
are you
am.
going?
Norway.
To Norway.
Oh, wow.
Well, you get to see the Northern Lights.
I am not joking.
Yeah. But that's fantastic, isn't it? Because that just shows you know, whatever diagnosis, whatever you're living with, just get on and live your life. You know, go on the cruise. Oh, you'll have a fantastic time. I hope you get to see the Northern Lights if you're going up to Norway. Yeah, you might do, mightn't you? That'll be beautiful, and I think that's the thing. You know, when we talk about dementia, people often think, oh, you know, it's a diagnosis. It's going to be the end of someone's life. It's the worst thing that can happen. It's horrible, or you know, or living with learning disability. We have all these fears and negative stigmas, but actually, you can live your best life and just get on with it and make your best life. You're a fantastic testament to that.
Because what we don't want to happen is for I think it's a case where everyone is different in life, in the sense that not many people, I think, can live a better life even with dementia.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you, Rosie. It's not, you know, it shouldn't be the most scary thing. It's, you know, it's, you just get on and live your life and make the best of it, don't you? And that's kind of, but with the right support, you can do that. I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's having the support, having someone to answer your questions, having a good support team and also professional team around who can help as well. So
because when I first heard from the GP that I had it, I knew straight away. I know only myself, I've never had it, and I never have until now.
Yeah.
When I first heard from the GP, it was like, why now?
Yeah.
And it hasn't been mentioned before.
Yeah, and that's it. And I know that
that's what's scary.
It is.
The healing tears.
Yeah, I think it is something that can be scary, but actually, it's like you said, it is about living your best life, and you know, and just going, okay, I've got that diagnosis, getting the information you need, getting the support, making the adjustments you need. You know, if you need your diaries, your Alexas, and then just living with it, you know, and getting the help and support when you need it. Thank you so much for everything you've shared, Rosie. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but I want to ask Jane a few questions if I could. And obviously, I know we're kind of coming up towards the last part, but if there is anybody who wants to request the mic and ask us a question, feel free to do so. But Jane, can I ask you a few questions? Because we were talking about support and what support's available for people, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your role. Obviously, I know what your role is as an Admiral nurse and what you do at MacIntyre, but can you tell us a little bit about what your role looks like and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I, as you know, as I said at the beginning, I work within MacIntyre, so my role is national. So I support services across England and Wales. So I always liken it a bit to similar to a community nurse post, but with obviously that dementia speciality. So a big part of my role is providing training, bespoke training for teams. So if staff are supporting somebody with a diagnosis, then I would go out and meet the person, look at the environment. So I can also do an environmental assessment, but then tailor the sort of the training more so towards that particular person, which has worked really well. Sort of looking at health surveillance, which I think as a nurse you do all the time anyway, so kind of going in and looking if there are any health issues that could be going on for that person. Also working with people themselves with learning disabilities and their families, and again, as we mentioned earlier, about the sharing their home with somebody who might have dementia and the changes they might see, and actually helping to support them understand some of those changes. But one thing we're looking at doing this year a bit more is sort of around brain health, so looking at where we can reduce risk of people developing dementia. Actually, again, coming back to that whole education side of things and flagging up those risks, and how we can actually support someone to live a sort of healthier lifestyle, etc., to reduce those risks. So I get involved with the diagnostic process in terms of supporting teams where they might be having difficulty, maybe getting somebody an assessment. Sadly, it was only this morning that I heard somebody say that actually the GP didn't feel that a dementia assessment was appropriate because the person had a learning disability, so they didn't feel that they were going to be able to decipher the difference between the two. And you just think, it's 2020, we shouldn't still be having those conversations. So, but a large part of my role is kind of being that bridge between the gap between social care and healthcare, sadly, but it is needed in some cases, not all cases. There's some amazing GPs, community teams out there. So yeah, and I guess in general, just raising awareness around dementia and people with learning disabilities is a huge part of what I do. Really, really varied work. So as I say, that's visits, emails, etc. Staff might just pick up the phone and say such and such is doing X, Y, and Z. What do we do? How do we respond to these questions they keep the person keeps asking? Sometimes people just need to be told that actually they're doing an amazing job in difficult circumstances. And just need someone to actually validate that for them.
I know one of the things that you've done, Jane, and I don't know who's listening today, or indeed you might be listening on when we record this and put it out onto YouTube, but people often as well in general nursing, in other fields of nursing, have got limited different understanding, I think is fair to say. Sometimes people aren't sure about how to support somebody, what to do. I was talking to some nurses not that long ago from a general hospital who were saying they just didn't really feel they'd got the skills and the knowledge, and when somebody with a learning disability came in to their care, that was sometimes they were a bit apprehensive about what to do and how to deal with, I know you've done lots of work around developing staff so that their understanding is better, and that actually wherever the person with learning disability comes in contact, nurses have got the skills to work with them and support them. And that's not, we know that of course if you add in dementia, you're adding in another layer of complication there potentially, but that's something that nurses don't always feel they've got the skill and the competence and the knowledge to deal with sometimes. And I know you've done some tremendous work in that field as well, haven't you, Jane?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult, and I think sometimes when you work in the world of learning disability, you almost take it for granted that you do this stuff day to day. So, and you do have to kind of take a step back sometimes and think, well, actually, some people might not have ever come into contact with somebody with a learning disability, and yeah, I mean, it is something that obviously we live and breathe within MacIntyre. I mean, there are lots of other things going on at the moment in terms of, I'm sure some people would have heard of the Oliver McGowan mandatory training that's going to be coming in, and if you haven't, then please Google it. It will come up. Heartbreaking story, but it's taught us so much. And again, that will be going out as mandatory training around people with learning disabilities and autistic people. For clinicians, that any service that's registered by CQC will have to undertake that training. So that I'm sure will raise awareness again, and that can only support, when we're talking about dementia, if people have got a good fundamental understanding of what a learning disability is, what having autism is, then that can only support as well when we're looking possibly with dementia. So there's some amazing work going on out there at the moment, really is.
Thank you, Jane. We've had a request from somebody who's joined us on stage who wants to come up and speak. So you should be able to speak. You should have the mic. Existential autist, would you like to ask us a question, make a comment? The floor's yours if you want to ask a question.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you very much there. Thanks to Dementia UK for hosting this space, and thanks to Jane for speaking, and all the best to MacIntyre as well. I found that very informative. So yes, I've kind of got a question and a point. First off, my name is Matty, known as Existential Autist online. I'm a proudly autistic, neurodivergent and disabled advocate and activist from the Northeast in the UK. So it always does me a lot of good to hear spaces being hosted. I also host Twitter spaces myself, ranging on the lived experience of being autistic, and taking pride in being autistic and disabled, and saying that disability isn't a dirty word. Being autistic rather than a person with autism. The vast majority of autistic people within the actually autistic community prefer autistic people. That's just a learning opportunity for everybody, and for me it's about learning from those fellow neurodivergent disabled people where they're at in life. And I really agreed with the sentiments on meeting people where they're at rather than trying to inherently change them. So in terms of that understanding and value of those who've dealt with a system, often in the UK, from my own experience and from the many I listen to internationally that have pathologized those who are disabled and neurodivergent as deficient, and being put in positions of conversion therapy into being neurotypical when people have neurodivergent and different disabled ways of being. I'm very passionate to keep that message going, that people do not need to be inherently changed or infantilized. It's the blessing of these differences and divergencies that bring the society I feel we need. And I guess the question, I apologize, thank you for it. Actually, I was going through a point there. The question is just building on that value of lived experience within Dementia UK. Just how many people who are learning disabled and neurodivergent are leading these kind of these discussions and feedback, and just the value of that. I appreciate there was quite a few sentiments there and points. Struggling with some sensory processing myself, but thank you for allowing me up to speak, and all the best going forward. So thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for joining us. And there's something that struck me is when you said about we're all different, right? Everybody's different, and if we were all the same, the world would be really, really boring, and it just wouldn't make sense anyway, would it? It would just be a very strange world. And actually, it's about celebrating those differences and the things that make us different people, and so I loved it when you were talking about that, because I think that's just so important. In terms of people, sorry, Jane, you were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking, yeah, absolutely, and we do need people to come on and kind of give us this information, because I think we sometimes assume so much And yeah, it does make a difference. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And I think the other thing to say is that I know that the work that MacIntyre have done, we were talking about earlier on about the leaflets that they've produced, and the group, which is the MacIntyre Checkers group, who are people with lived experience who have sort of sense checked the resources that have been developed, and looked through them. And certainly the leaflets that we've produced at Dementia UK, so we've got a leaflet that talks about dementia and people with learning disabilities, and that was checked as well by the MacIntyre Checkers. So we want to make sure that the resources that are developed are fit for purpose, they're appropriate, they're understandable, they're clear, not scary in any way. All of these things. It's about striving to make sure they're appropriate. And the other thing that we're doing is looking at resources that we can get on things like YouTube. So because not everybody is going to want to read something, somebody might want to watch a short video, and to learn that way, and to get some support that way. So we've developed some of those. We've got a Dementia UK YouTube channel, and on the YouTube channel, if you subscribe to it, you'll see all the ones we put up. But on there's also a summer school, which is actually Jane and I doing a presentation talking about dementia and people with learning disabilities, and also sharing a video which features the friends we spoke about earlier on. So there is resources out there. Have a look. But I'm just so glad that you joined us and came up and asked your question, although you have got an incredibly hard name for me to pronounce, so I was get my tongue around it, so I hope I did it okay. So thank you.
No, thank you. May I just say, I'll be very quick. Thank you so much for answering that. And my name is Matty, short for Matthew.
Easier.
But I appreciate your responses, and honestly, all you do. I learned so much from that, and I've had lived experience with family. So I appreciate you and everybody on the endeavour for that. Yeah, those rights, it means a lot. So all the best going forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Matty, and thank you for joining us as a speaker. I know you said you host spaces, so it's probably not so scary for you, but I know for some people getting up as a speaker is a bit, but well done for doing that. So we're coming up to the last few minutes, which is amazing. This hour always goes so fast. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask the speakers who are with me this evening, what would you like to see in the future? Now, that's a massive question. So I'll give you a minute to think about that if you want. But what would you like? I'm guessing from that Rosie, you know what you want in the future. Straight up. What do you want to see in the future?
Quite. So I think.
Yeah.
Let's do it together, I think.
Yeah, we can do this one together. Thanks for putting us on the spot there, Vic. No, I know I would love to see moving forwards really, really good relationships with health professionals, really working together to get the best outcome for people that are living with a diagnosis of dementia or a suspicion, and that the understanding of a learning disability isn't scary, just sort of educating ourselves on how to communicate so a person understands that.
True.
Anything for the future, Rosie?
If
you had a magic wand.
I think it's a case of moving forward. There's always a way that people can move forward with dementia. Getting research, looking at ways of, in terms of like normal people, to
finding out more.
Finding out. I think it's a case of getting that research to and finding out more what they can do in terms of getting across what it is they've got, they can live well with it.
Yeah, you're so right. And actually, something you said there, I would agree with you so much about is about that research, including people in research, so we've got more information about what's actually going on. I mean, that's something we want more research in dementia anyway, but actually specifically when you're thinking about in people with learning disability, having research there, evidence-based practice to be able to say this makes a difference, this is good practice, and people with a learning disability just being more visible in that, because I think sometimes they're not as visible when we come to thinking about dementia research, or even policies that are wrote to support people with dementia. They don't always have quite the emphasis that you might like in terms of learning disabilities. So I guess I'm kind of jumping on the back of your hope for the future and telling you what mine is there. But I guess it's more visibility, it's more awareness, it's more consideration. Jane, go on. What are you going to say?
No, it's just really, I mean, it sounds like a cop out, but just to echo everything that Rosie said, because she said it so beautifully that, I think we know in terms of dementia, there's a lot of research that goes on and there needs to be more. And, I think really just equality. I think for people with learning disabilities and the autistic population to get the same quality services as the rest of us, as they're entitled to and should be, rightly so. So that's my
Jane. Rosie's got a what do you say, Rosie? What see what I can do? What's your saying that you say sometimes?
I always find it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do.
I love it.
Perfect.
Do you know what, Rosie? I think you've just given us the perfect ending for this space. So if everybody takes away one message, it's actually not to think about what you can't do, but what you can do, and to go for that. And and that's a really important hope for all of our future, really, isn't it? To kind of live our best lives that way. So we've come to the end of our hour, right? It always goes so fast. I hope that's been interesting for everybody listening this evening. I'm really sorry anybody who was here at the start where there was a little bit of technical difficulty and a little bit of interference, which was my 9-year-old suddenly deciding he wanted to join the space. We didn't let him. I don't know what mayhem would have ensued had he joined us. So that's our space done for today. Thank you for joining us. Next month we're going to be talking about Lewy body dementia, and I'm going to be joined by the CEO of the Lewy Body Society and a lady who lives with young onset dementia and Lewy bodies, and also an Admiral nurse who is the consultant Admiral nurse for Lewy bodies. So really good session coming up next. I think that's the 14th of July, but check out the Dementia UK Twitter channel, check out the Epic Lyons Twitter channel, my tweet, and because we will share it and let you know when that space is coming. So thank you everybody who's listened. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Rosie. And of course, thank you, Nikki, as well. I'm going to very shortly end the space, but thank you everybody who's listened as well. And have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.